This is Ethiopia, one of the hungriest countries in the world. But here, foreign companies are spending billions of dollars to grow food for export. An area the size of Britain has been handed over to corporations in the last 3 years. It's called a land rush. I'm in Ethiopia's remote southwest Gambela region to investigate claims that large numbers of small farmers are being moved off their land by the government. Now, all this land for the next hour of our driving is going to be some kind of farming, intensive industrial agriculture. We're driving west through Karaturi Farm, a new Indian venture, where large areas of forest are already being cleared to grow palm oil, rice and sugar. Are you going there? Hello. Hello. It will be one of the largest farms in Africa, but most of the food will be exported. Populations are growing, so this has to be good for the world. But what about Ethiopia's poor? The man in charge is Kamjit Shekon. So how big will this whole farm be?
Phase 1, 100,000 hectares.
After that?
After the second phase, 100,000 plus 200,000.
So 300,000 hectares. And if I started walking at one end, how long would it take me to get to the other end?
100,000 hectares is about 121 kilometers.
120 kilometers, that's 80, 90 miles.
90 miles.
That's big.
Yeah.
It's as big as Wales. So will you plant, will you build a town just by here?
Yes, do you see those trees?
Yes.
There will be the town, next camp coming up.
So that will be Camp 2 and that will be 10,000 people?
Maybe 10 to 15,000.
Karaturi says it will build home schools and clinics for as many as 60,000 workers. But on one of their other Ethiopian farms, similar promises made by the government have yet to be fulfilled. In addition, we found they pay most workers under $1 a day. That's well below what the World Bank says is extreme poverty. I think that because you were the first people here, you've got the best land. I think you've got the river access.
We never saw the land.
Yeah? Oh, you never saw it?
They gave it to us, we took it.
Seriously?
Seriously.
You did not even see it?
Yes.
They offered it to you?
They offered. That's all.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Razak.
This has to be the deal of the century. 1,000 square miles for just £150 a week. Plus, they get tax breaks and roads built for them by the government. Now, presumably, all the trees, all the forests which we see at the moment will have to come down, so you can plant them.
Yes.
Is that inevitable, or is that just...
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
You have to clear this.
Yeah.
Then there has to be a road network for harvesting.
So it's very mechanized, it's very industrialized, it's very precise. Karaturi says their land was sparsely populated and denied displacing local villagers. On the way back to Gambela town, we passed a group of shacks along the side of the road, near where other foreign companies are moving in. This is Kami village, which we think is full of displaced people, but we'll see. Well, these people clearly haven't been here for very long. These are very rudimentary tents. Around 250 people have been living here for 8 months. Chief, thank you so much for talking to me. Thank you very much indeed. Most of the people here displaced from other areas. Why did they have to move? The government moved these people and told them they would get a health clinic, a school, as well as fresh drinking water. So far, only the foundations have been dug. Okay, these people are pastoralists. They're quite used to moving backwards and forwards across land. What they don't realize is this land may be taken away from them forever. That would be very different for them. I'm going to the state government to find out how many companies have come to Gambela. Hello. And we want to know how many people will be affected by the land rush. We've got 3 maps here in the investment office. This is the extraordinary map because it shows that for the last, for 10 years, 12 years, there's been just about nothing. In 2007, it started going right up. Since then, there have been hundreds, and I've just been told that the total number of investors in Gambela region is 896. Now, that is an extraordinary figure from absolutely nothing only 10 years ago. Kasahun Zefu is one of the department's senior officials. What countries are they coming from?
India, Saudi Arabia, and China, and so forth.
Can you explain why you are relocating villages?
We relocate villagers to obtain clean water in one place, to obtain medical services.
So the two things are very separate. One is the relocation, the deliberate relocation of villages,
Yeah.
and the second thing is the investment by the foreigners, and the two have no link whatever.
There is no link. Yeah.
So it's a coincidence.
Yeah.
That the
Yeah.
villagers are relocating.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So the villagers, when they relocate, can they go back to their land?
No.
They can't go back to their land.
Yeah.
So
It
who
is because
takes
it
the
is
land?
voluntary relocation.
It's all voluntary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
right.
Kasahun said as many as 15,000 people are being moved, but at the same time, thousands of square miles is being cleared. Great swathes of Gambella are being ecologically devastated. Carbon emissions will rise and wildlife will vanish. I had been told about a village not far from the Karature farm that had been cleared just weeks ago. Actually, the whole of this was the village. So it's not just the few houses which we see left there. All of this was actually a village pretty recently. There's nothing left. They've all gone. And they've left the storage pots. We don't know the name of the village, but we do know that people were here about 5 months ago. Gambella is up for grabs, and foreign investors are not the only ones moving into the region. Wealthy Ethiopians from other parts of the country are also leasing huge areas of land. Okay, we've just stopped the car because we found a small group of people who may have something to say about the burning down of this forest. Many of the villagers we met were too scared to talk to us about what was happening. But one man was willing to speak on condition we disguised his identity. Have you tried to stop the bulldozers? Have you tried to stop them setting fire to the ground? The farmer told me he didn't want to move to a resettlement village. Will they have to forcibly evict you? The man was frightened of being beaten up by soldiers. Some farmers have reportedly disappeared or been killed for speaking out against the government. Do you think you're in danger? Later that day we returned to Addis Ababa. Ethiopia's government is desperate for development and jobs for its growing population, and you can understand why it wants to attract foreign investment to a country that can't grow enough food for itself. But I still wasn't sure if the land rush in Gambella was in the people's best interests. I put what we'd seen in Gambella to the Minister for Agriculture, Wanda Radmandefro. Minister, when we were down there, we saw a lot of evidence of people having to move because of the investors moving into the area. Can you confirm that, please?
By the way, there is no movement of population.
Minister, with respect, we found many villagers who were frightened, who were worried, who had been told that they would have to move.
It's their choice, either to choose to have these basic services coming to the village, therefore it's based on their willingness. But of course, you know, they have to abandon their previous way of life. You cannot provide any basic services having highly scattered community.
So you have 3 million people, 2.9 million, 2.8 million, who this year will receive food aid from America, from Europe, from wherever, at the same time as you are trying to export large amounts of food and commodities to America and other countries. Is this not sort of rather complete madness?
You said madness, but it is not madness, and it's a correct way.
The government is saying that Ethiopia's poor will only become less reliant on aid if they give up their old way of life, and that large-scale industrial farming in places like Gambela is not just the future, but a development necessity. We've just come out from the minister, and clearly he's hoping for an enormous increase in productivity in farming in Ethiopia. The danger, clearly, is that the companies take advantage of this, that they will grow what they want to grow, and they will sell it to whom they want to sell it, and the real benefit for Ethiopia will never be seen at all. And the real danger for Ethiopia is that they will have given away their land for next to nothing.
Well, in the course of our research, on one hand, we found the deals of Malaysia, we found the deals of Saudi Star in Ethiopia, and none of those were really shocking because we had heard about it from the media. What was indeed more shocking was to find private hedge funds and equity funds who are promising investors, anywhere from 20 to 40% returns. And with that message, they're luring in endowments, including university endowments, such as the Harvard University, Vanderbilt University, who have completely decided to close their eyes to what's happening in Africa. They have completed to let go of the principles of socially responsible investment. And all they care about is those high returns. And they have chosen to remain uninformed and uneducated about the policy decisions that they make. What is interesting is that most of these investment funds have an exit strategy of 5 to 6 years. They plan to go in, they plan to reap profits because they're the first ones to get into Africa, get land for very cheap, and within 5-6 years, without having to pay taxes, which the International Monetary Fund says is one of the key resources for countries in Africa to grow and develop, they would just exit, African nations, leaving behind devastated communities, devastated lands, and they would be accountable to no one. And universities such as Harvard and Spelman and Wake Forest and George Washington, who are involved in it, have chosen to go ahead just so they can see their endowments grow. So this really calls for what the universities had to do in the case of South Africa and apartheid. It is time to get out of these funds and invest in ways which build communities, which do not devastate communities. In February, I was in Zambia, where over and over again I was told that it was very easy to secure land. Zambia is a country where 94% of the land is under customary rights. So if you are a foreign investor and you want to secure land, you have to get the permission of the chief. I was told you go with a bottle of Johnny Walker and you kneel down, you clap 3 times and make your offering of Johnny Walker whiskey, and you have secured the title to the land. In the absence of information, in the absence of due process and consultation, I was told by the government agencies that's all we needed to do, and they were quick to move in. The other interesting story I was told is once we secure land, that's when the banks would move in to provide the credit. So we live in a world where 70% of the world's poor are our smallholder farmers who do not have access to credit, who do not have extension services. We are told that we need to get, mechanize our agriculture so we can feed the world, ignoring studies from United Nations, again, that show that the way we deal with climate change, the way we feed the world is to ensure livelihoods of small farmers. But instead, in this rush for mechanized farming, for growing agrofuels, biofuels, or for growing grains for export, we are willing to sacrifice women farmers, we are willing to sacrifice indigenous communities with no solutions for what happens to them in Africa. That is only one thing that can happen to them, and that is increased conflict in Africa. So it is kind of shameful that while in the Western world we paint Africa as a basket case, we talk about its hunger, we talk about its corruption, but we are responsible for trying to steal and turn it into a bread basket for the North.
Africa, growing populations and rising food prices worldwide are fueling demand for cheap agricultural land. Companies from Asia and the Middle East are snapping up millions of acres in Africa. Nations like Ethiopia are desperate for the investment, but critics claim it's at the expense of smallholder farmers, many of whom say they're being thrown off their land to make way for the large multinationals. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Jonathan Rugman now reports.
Think of drought-stricken Ethiopia and you might not expect to see this. Modern machinery owned by a foreign multinational cultivating vast farms in one of the poorest countries in the world. The goal here is simple: to double Ethiopia's agricultural production, to make it self-sufficient, so that handouts from Britain, America and others are no longer required. Vinay Shekhar is on the front line of this agrarian revolution. He's a farm manager from India running an estate in Ethiopia. His company is called Karaturi, and these 29,000 acres are a small slice of its empire, with the Ethiopians pledging almost 800,000 acres to the Indian firm so far. Ethiopia's land is owned by its post-communist government, and that land can't feed its people. Farming methods are medieval, with the land parcelled up among millions of small-scale tenant farmers. So now the country's agriculture minister is giving foreign companies like Karaturi cheap leases to revolutionise food production.
We give land because we could not be able to produce on that land because of lack of capital and lack of technology in those areas. Therefore, that's the reason why. They open huge opportunity for employment and, of course, generation of taxes and other financial gains.
But Gamechu Garbaba talks of loss, not gain. He's pointing to Karaturi farmland, which he says the government took from him to give to the Indians instead.
When they first came, they told us an investor was coming and we would develop the land alongside one another. They didn't say the land would be taken away from us entirely. I don't understand why the government took the land.
Mr. Garbaba now grows maize on land nearby, which he sublets each year from a neighbour. It's precarious, he says. He could lose his tenancy at any moment. And at the family home, his wife complains that the cattle have almost nowhere to graze because their old fields have gone.
Since the land was taken away from us, we're impoverished. Nothing has gone right since these investors came.
Next door, Karaturi is beginning to work agricultural wonders. It runs the farm under a 50-year lease and says it will sell most of its produce inside Ethiopia itself. With their Indian manager watching them, these women say they're grateful to have a job, earning just under 50 pence each per day. Karaturi can see such good profits that it's investing nearly $1 billion in Ethiopia, though in an interview in 2010, the company's founder said it was shameful to accuse the firm of land grabs when the country's being transformed.
Why do they need to import food? Isn't it a shame? I mean, I almost feel some sort of a conspiracy out there that people want Africa to keep remaining with a begging bowl. Here we are creating employment. We are creating food. We are creating wealth. Isn't that what Adam Smith spoke about? Isn't that the reason why the Western world is self-sufficient today? I don't think creating wealth is a crime.
Yet in this village hut, everyone complains they have less food than before because Karaturi now farms where they once did. Teresa Agasa helped put together this petition to change the government's mind. And when that didn't work, he took a job as a security guard for Karaturi for 45 pence a day.
We wish we could eat 3 times a day. I know my children want this, but I cannot provide that. We live and survive only if we have land, and we would rather have our land back.
Ethiopia's agriculture minister claims there's no conflict with local communities and no need to provide compensation. But people here speak bitterly of forced evictions, and this is just a snapshot of a story now playing out all over Africa, as multinationals strike land deals with governments desperate for investment. The risk is colonial-style plantations and local people swept aside in a world badly in need of more food costing less.